Getting to the end of this talk now, and I want to talk a little bit about potential herbal remedies and nutrition. Because as a nutritionist, I don't think you can talk about respiratory tract infections, and certainly as a sports nutritionist, without talking a little bit about nutrition. So again, I mentioned right at the start, go around the supermarket aisles, you can find lots of things like this. Here's a herbal cold care. So this is supposed to, I don't know, stop you getting sick or not as sick from here. But you've got other things like zinc defense lozenges. Whenever the team that I worked with, the Glasgow Warriors, were going on tour or traveling somewhere, we gave them travel packs and it had things like zinc lozenges and vitamin C and things like that. Now, we got most of this stuff for free from companies like HealthSpan, but we were better off just giving it to them just in case, to try and offset any illnesses as well. The other two I've got down here, that's vitamin D. That's the other one. So vitamin C, vitamin D, and zinc, these are common ways in which people try to combat potential infections and disease. Now, vitamin C is probably the most famous one, and it's because of this guy called Linus Pauling. Linus Pauling's a Nobel Prize winning scientist, a chemist, I think he was. And he suggested that mega dosing with vitamin C back in the 1950s was an effective way to prevent you getting the common cold. So just take lots and lots of vitamin C, thousands of milligrams, not the amount that you get from just eating oranges. And this was the proposed mechanism, essentially, which was microbes produce reactive oxidative species. So oxidative stress, that causes inflammation. Vitamin C is an antioxidant. So if we've got enough vitamin C in our body, then that will quench some of those reactive oxygen species produced by the microbes and thus prevent us from getting vitamin C. That's your rationale. There are other mechanisms proposed as well, though. So your immune cells, neutrophils, what they do is they fire these things called oxidative bursts, effectively reactive oxygen species at microbes, and that damages microbes and allows your body to eradicate them from there. So you produce a high oxidative stress load from your immune system, and you've got vitamin C in your body as a way of managing and mopping up some of that excess vitamin C. So you need a certain amount, otherwise you might become immunocompromised as well. And again, that's the rationale. That's the rationale. So you can read this paper on here about it if you want. There might be a inflammation angle, there might be a oxidative stress angle on this. Certainly vitamin C prevents us getting scurvy, but that's a way. And people have since suggested that it interacts directly with inflammation pathways and things like this as well. Zinc's another one, and in combination with vitamin C, zinc has been proposed to influence the immune system. So again, there's a few different mechanisms here whereby you need zinc to help you produce these tight barriers between the cells so that that stops microbes passing between them, like I described right at the start of this lecture. You need your zinc to help you with several enzyme reactions as well. And it allows the development of T cells and B cells, which are white blood cells, from progenitor cells like stem cells. So if you've not got enough zinc, you can't develop your white blood cells as well. However, zinc is involved in thousands of enzymatic reactions. So if you don't have enough zinc, then you see a compromised organism just in general. It's not specific fully just to the immune system, but certainly it's important, zinc. It is important. And sports nutritionists have caught on enough that it's important to suggest that we should all be having zinc lozenges. Vitamin D. Vitamin D in a sufficient term, when you've got enough vitamin D, allows the proper activation of the innate immune system. So it allows your antigen presenting cells, that's what an APC is, to go out and to interact with microbes which are potentially harmful, and then your body's own white blood cells. If you don't have your enough vitamin D, you don't potentially have that mechanism in place, which leaves you liable to inflammation and to infection, right? And again, here's a nice schema on it. At the bottom of this presentation, these are links as well that you can follow up on. However, the question is like, does any of this stuff actually work? One thing's true, and I mentioned this before, like nutritional status matters. If you are a healthy organism and you've got enough vitamin C and you've got enough vitamin D and calcium and zinc and things like that in your body, then your body's systems are going to work more effectively compared to if your fuel tank's empty. So the recommendations for vitamin C in America are different from the vitamin C recommendations in the UK. The vitamin C recommendations in America are based on the amount you need to saturate a white blood cell so that you get optimal function. In the UK, it's how much do you need to offset scurvy, right? So certainly, if you've got topped up levels, you're probably going to do better. Probably going to do better. The other thing that I've got on here is, this is the inflammasome. This is the signaling pathway for inflammation, and there's various receptors on the outside of the cells that will interact with the outside environment. And then within the cell, there's lots of different proteins which signal each other, which eventually tell your body to upregulate some sort of inflammatory process, and then the cell does something, right? Now, there's thousands of these little pathways. Just because we can take a petri dish of immune cells and we can dose it in vitamin C or zinc or vitamin D, and we see some of these different pathways being upregulated, doesn't mean that you're going to see any real world effect on cold and flu symptoms. Okay, you see some things getting upregulated, right, great. But mechanistic reasoning doesn't necessarily translate into any real magnitude of effect, right? A 1 or 2% increase in something called NF-kappa B, which is a inflammatory marker, doesn't necessarily translate into one less sick day a week. It doesn't necessarily work like that. Sometimes better things to actually track are hard markers rather than soft markers. So things like, for example, what has been the cold and flu tablet drug purchasing for a supermarket for this flu season? What are hospital admissions? What are numbers of sick days, for example? These are better markers to look at sometimes than some of this other stuff. And when it comes to vitamin C, that seems to be the story. And it seems to be the story with a lot of this stuff, that it doesn't look like vitamin C per se necessarily reduces you getting sick. If you get an infection, you get the infection, you get the infection. What it might do is it might reduce the overall duration. So instead of being sick for 7 days, you're sick for 6 days. And it might reduce the severity. So instead of being bedbound, you can get up and walk around a little bit, right? But these things are difficult to measure because they're all subjective. They're all subjective. It is, how did you feel? Did you call in for work, etc.? And some people will get a cold or flu or whatever and just get on with their lives and not phone into work, whereas someone else might get a little snivel and then they're off work for 5-6 days. So everybody's different with this stuff, and it makes it very difficult to to determine how effective some of these things are. But it isn't clear if supplementation or at all is really all that effective. And it's why there's no approved health claims with vitamin C, and our current Cochrane database consensus is that more research is really needed to work this out. But at the moment, we're more firmly of the opinion that probably at this moment in time, it doesn't really do a whole lot. And EFSA, the European Food Safety Authority, they're the ones that set out approved health claims. They're the ones that will say things like whole grains are good for your heart and that they will reduce blood pressure, which will reduce cardiovascular disease. There's nothing like that for all your herbal teas and things like this. Not in Europe anyway. You can make different claims in the Americas.